everyone, welcome to Project Insight, product training webinar. This is the first one of the new year, and the topic will be on using the Microsoft Outlook and Office connector. Just a few housekeeping things before we get started. All of the participants will be muted, but if any questions do come up, go ahead and type those into the questions box. You can find that on your GoToWebinar panel. We can go over any questions that come up at the end of today's session, or you can send an email to info@projectinsight.net and we'll have someone answer your question. If you'd like to review anything that you learned today, I will be posting a recording of today's session in the Project Insight community. That'll be under the product training webinars under the video section. So I'm Janelle with Project Insight. Here's my information if you have any questions about Project Insight, our trainings, or anything else. And your trainer today is Wes Cleaver in training and support. So the business objectives of this training are for you to know if the Outlook connector is the ideal way for your team members to update tasks, and to help you to understand the power of creating tasks and issues from emails. For the agenda, we'll start out by showing you how to set up the client to use the add-ons, download the client-side add-ons. We'll go over the connectivity settings and how to update tasks from Outlook. And then we'll go into creating items from emails, syncing them back to Project Insight, and go over some best practices for saving Office documents with the add-on. So I'll go ahead and pass this on to Wes so he can get started.
Thank you, Janelle. And we'll start, we're going to start right in a folder where we'll save our emails and files. So I want to, and I also want to show you what it looks like in Outlook to set this up. So for starters, I'm just over in a files folder. I've already navigated to a files folder. We'll use this as our practice area for uploading any data that we're connecting to with the Outlook connector and the Office connector. So I'll be using both Outlook and Word today to demonstrate this. Now we'll start over here in Outlook, and I'll pull that over into my screen for just a moment here. Well, first I do want to also show you that the download of the connectors must be done by an administrator. So even though I'm not showing administration here, but there is an administration section where there are desktop tools, and those desktop tools include the Project Insight Outlook connector and the Project Insight Office connector. They can download those files and share them with you however they choose to do that, whether they want to put them, normally they'll just put them on a network drive and an internal network drive, but you will need to get those files from them in order to install them. And we do that to keep some control on it. We don't necessarily want all desktop users to start installing software because they want to. We want to make sure that the administrators have coordinated with your Windows Help Desk internal resources to incorporate a supported application on your desktops. This is a desktop application. Okay, so once they have that, or once you have that and it's installed, you'll see it in a couple different places. First, I'll show you in Outlook. And in Outlook, we have add-ins, and you'll see I have a bunch of different add-ins in here. But the top line are the settings that you'll see for Project Insight once the Outlook connector is installed. You have the PI settings, which you need to use to get started. The PI settings pull up a window that asks, what is your URL? This would be the URL for your site. What's your username, and what is your password? You need to fill this out because Project Insight is accessed based on the it will be accessed based on the an HTTP connection or HTTPS that you see here. So we're not accessing through Exchange, and we will not be, we're not going through any kind of server in your facility. We're simply connecting from the desktop to Project Insight. So you do need to keep this up to date. Now there is an exception here, use integrated Windows authentication. This only works if your system administrators in your company have already configured authentication to work between your servers and Project Insight and your network and Project Insight without the requirement of authentication. This is not common, but if you do have it, you can check that box. Otherwise, if you check that box, it will take this functionality away, and we don't want to do that. You can see it actually put my domain name in there, so I need to reset it. But I do want to show you that in most cases you would not use that setting. It wouldn't do anything. Then you test the settings, and I need to do that because I changed them. You test the settings, and it will let you know they're valid. Other settings that we can do, and those show up down here below, is to sync tasks and to sync to-dos. Now typically what we'll do is we'll sync, and I'll keep this one simple, we'll sync our tasks. So I'm going to show you how to do that. We'll show the simple things first. We'll sync tasks, and we'll update the % complete from Outlook. We'll remove tasks when marked complete, and we can create a reminder for each task. Now there's a difference between a reminder and a task in Outlook versus something that's on the calendar. And you'll notice here in my Outlook, I have a link for calendar and I have a link for tasks. They are really two different things. Outlook handles them as two different things. And that's something to keep in mind when you look at synchronizing tasks, is that Outlook is not a project management system. It does not have all the data that a task would have in any kind of project management system, whether it's Project Insight or even Microsoft Project. They're not the same thing. We're matching up data fields as closely as we can using the facilities that are available in Outlook to help the end users, to help any of you who are out there working as resources get that information into Outlook and not always have to look to Project Insight to get it. Not have to look into the Project Insight interface to get it. So these are the settings, and I mention that because one thing that you could do is you could create an appointment on my calendar for tasks and just mark those tasks with a status of free. Okay, there are a couple different options here. A lot of people really like this when they first look at it, and I'm going to ask that you withhold doing that at first, at least withhold doing it this way, because as tempting as it is to have your calendar and Outlook tell you everything that's on your plate for the day, in many cases it's really not feasible to put everything on your calendar that's in Project Insight within the same interface as everything that you're scheduled to do, things like this call today. You know, today was an appointment, and I want to make sure that my appointments, the things that I need, when I need to call in at a very specific time or call a very specific person at a very specific time, that I don't mix that information in with ongoing activities in Project Insight. Now, we do default to marking the time as free, so there's some differentiator there. But I do want to mention that because we've seen people do that, and it can clutter your Outlook interface if you have a lot of tasks assigned to you in Project Insight. If you only do a few tasks here and there, it's not so bad. If you do a lot of them, it may produce a lot of clutter. You just need to be careful with that. Now, the other thing is that if you were to create an appointment, you could also say only for tasks designated as an appointment. There is an advanced setting in tasks within Project Insight that you can use to make those tasks have a value of appointment. And the appointment value in those tasks has no other feature other than the Outlook connector feature that you're seeing here. This is its only purpose. is to make sure that we do have certain tasks. Oftentimes we configure them in the template so that they roll out into every project, and we're very specific as to which tasks will show up in the Outlook calendar. So oftentimes when creating an appointment on a calendar, we'll find a lot of our customers will use this, and they'll say, well, I've really got two really critical milestone type tasks or two critical meetings that have to occur, and I manage those meetings based on the date and time right inside Project Insight. Because I do that, it's okay to bring those over as scheduled appointments in my Outlook calendar, in which case I might even want to say, maybe make it busy. So those are just some options that you have when you set this up. All right, I'll leave that off of there. And while I'm showing this, I do want to show you one other thing before I go into using it in Outlook. I'm going to also show you Word over here. So I've got document version 1 and document version 2 just showing up in a Word document that I'm just starting with, but also to show you that when I go to any other Office, Microsoft Office application, well, not any other, but Word, PowerPoint, or Excel. When I go to PI settings here, if I've already set these settings in Outlook, they'll already be in the Office connector. This part synchronizes up with the same data, and you'll notice that in the Office connector there are not nearly as many selections. That's simply because Office doesn't have a lot of options. It's simply, I want to save my Word file as this file uploads into Project Insight. And we'll get back to that one in a moment. So I'll pull that away. We'll go back to Outlook. Now, let's say that we'll do something real simple at first. I've got this, I'll open up my email. This is our webinar email here for today's webinar. And this is a reminder of that. If I want to save this to Project Insight, I can simply hit Save to PI here. It will connect with Project Insight, and then it goes to the last place I was, which is last time I used it, I was right here in the same location, Files. And it'll show me another document that I have here. And I can name the file that this should be. This is my webinar 413. And I'll save it. Now, when I save it, it'll put it over here in Files. I don't need to click here. I can just click OK. But it will also help me get to the right location where I just placed that file by giving me a link right here. And, of course, then this link helps me to go directly to, over here I was in the Files folder, and if I refresh that, I'll see that it uploaded my my email. So I can refresh that and see that it uploaded my email. There we go. But if I just click on the link, it goes right into the email. You'll see the data right here. What it's doing is it's copying the email, the basic email data over into Project Insight. It will put some basic HTML, mostly text, in here, and it will fill in some data fields such as when was it received. The subject, I actually changed it by changing the name, and the content of the email. So this is not hooking up with, as I mentioned earlier, this is not hooking up with Exchange. If something changes on that email, if somebody sends something back and a correction on that email, this is not hooked up live to your email system. We don't bypass any kind of or set up any kind of security that allows Project Insight to hook directly into your network and work with your email. This is simply a way to take those emails and save them, really almost like files in Project Insight. You'll see that it'll tell you the type is email versus having a Word file in here like this one. But it's simply a copy of the data from your email. Now let's go back and look at some of the other things. So that's a real simple one. I just want to save this email up there. But what if I wanted to, what if this were an issue? and I wanted to create an issue. Well, what I could do there is say, well, this is a problem that needs to be addressed. Somebody typed in a nice long description here, and I want to make an issue of it. Rather than going to the issues in Project Insight and copying and pasting the data, what I could do instead is go to create an issue, and it pulls up an issue form very similar to the one that I fill out whenever I have any kind of an issue in Project Insight. A couple of small differences, but for the most part, what it's going to do is it pulls up, it says, okay, here's your issue description, your basic description, and here's your full description. Once again, just like I did when I saved the email, I can change the data here. And for issues, you often do. The subject might be have a reply or a forward or other things in it that really aren't appropriate or just are really just clutter, and you want to keep a nice, neat issue description for the new issue that you're going to set up. So I'll say webinar for today. Then I'll change it. Then I can go in here and change any of this data. But again, when somebody sends you an issue, an email, a lot of the times there's good information in here that you can just take verbatim, leave it in there, and save the issue off, and you have a nice full description of what needs to be addressed for the issue. You can fill in the steps to reproduce and a lot of the other data that might be relevant here. You can assign it. You can see it's pulling the assigned to data from the system, from Project Insight. So I can assign this to somebody, categorize it. I can even decide that not only do I want to create this issue with this data in it, but I'd like to keep the entire email data, just like when I saved the email before. I'd like to make that an attachment to the issue, plus if there were any attachments to the email itself, I'm not only going to attach the email to the issue, but I'm also going to attach the attachments within the email into the issue in Project Insight. So you have a couple of options for that. Another couple things you can do, here's an open when saved. This is simply saying after I save it, I want to be able to go to that issue. And now I'm ready to save it. When you create issues in Project Insight, a lot of the times you're creating them from within the project so it knows where to go. When I do it this way, it doesn't necessarily know where to go. And it'll go to my default location, which, well, I'll just go ahead and use that for now since that's where we're practicing today. And remember I said open after saving, so it loaded up the issue. So here we have issue number 43, webinar for today, and we have all that issue data in here. It went exactly where I wanted it to go, into my files folder. And again, if I go back to this display on my files folder, you'll see the issue in here. So it's just that easy to create an issue. It's one of the most common functions that is used of the Outlook connector, is to pull the data in from an email somebody sends you and create an issue from it. Similarly, you can create a task. Now, I'll show that to you quickly. I'm not necessarily I won't go through a lot of detail here because once you know how to create an issue, if you're a project manager on a project, you can create a task as well. Very similar. It's just like the data on a task form or the data that you fill out when you fill out a task. Very similar to setting an issue. The difference with a task is that we don't necessarily have all the abilities to set predecessors and successors, so oftentimes we actually default to having a constraint of a start date that you might want to implement into the project. This is a lesser used feature, but it can come in handy once again to add a task into a project. Normally tasks have enough detail, and there are probably other bits of information that you need from the project to know exactly what to do with the task that you wouldn't be able to implement here. So typically what would happen when you create a task is you set up the data the way you, at least what you know you want. Then again, you say open with save. When saved, you save it, and then you'll need to go into the project and manipulate it to work within the infrastructure of the schedule that you already set up. All right, next, so that's just a couple different save options. The main things, save just an email. That's just a plain email save. Creating an issue, very common, and then a little less common would be creating a task. So this is saying the email will create a task in Project Insight. The reverse of that would be the Project Insight will create a task in Outlook. An existing Project Insight task will create an Outlook task. So if I go to my Outlook tasks here, well, I have a bunch of them. I'll just go ahead and take those out right now. And I do want to point out while I'm doing that, this is a good time to reference that when I look at a list of tasks, if I delete them, I'm not deleting tasks in Project Insight. Project Insight is, or Outlook connector, the Outlook connector is intended to give resources a list of tasks that they're working on and let them update, do very, very basic updates such as how far along are they on their task, what's their % complete, and also what is the, how much time have they spent. They can increment the time that they've spent on a task, and that's it. It is not a project manager's tool. Project managers still use it, but not nearly as often as a resource would. A project manager can't go into task editing in Outlook and start changing schedules in Project Insight by using an Outlook interface and changing data in the tasks in Outlook. It does not, there are security settings that prevent that from happening. And it would be very high probability of error if a project manager were to try manipulating a schedule within Outlook and not looking at Project Insight. So that is not a function of this. What is a function of the Outlook connector is simply to say, okay, I want to go synchronize my tasks. And remember, I set up those rules before. So here are a bunch of tasks, more than I actually expected, but here are a bunch of tasks that are in Project Insight that are not completed. Notice that everything in here is under 100% complete. So if I go in here and click on Determine Project Scope, if I open that up and I say, well, it is 100% complete, so I mark this off as 100% complete. I open it up, I go to the completion, I mark it off as 100% complete. I save and close it. It shows as complete here. I still need to update Project Insight, so I hit Synchronize Tasks, and you'll notice Determine Project Scope is gone. I can pull up Logical Design, and here what I'll do something a little bit different. We'll update this to 25% complete. I'll go into the details, and you can see the actual work is 0 hours. Well, I'm going to take that from 0 hours to 2 hours. So I want to say that's 2 hours, save and close. Then again, synchronize tasks. Okay, now it's 25% complete. It was 0, and I've done 2 hours worth of time on it. Now, by clicking on the link within the detail here, I'll go directly to the task. I'll see that 25% complete. And remember that when I entered the time, it will, let's see, I entered 2 hours of time. It should have incremented that. Let me just check this again. Let me see what's going on here. We should have a time entry of 2 hours. I'm just going to check and make sure I did that right again. So we'll go back and look at the task. It may have been that I had done 2 synchronized tasks, something you wouldn't normally do. But I did 2 synchronized tasks back to back, and it may have been that enough time hadn't lapsed and it updated the time of 0 from the server down to Project Insight rather than, or I'm sorry, from the server down to Outlook rather than from Outlook to the server. So we'll give it a couple minutes before I do that again. But we did get the % complete updated. We don't have the time entry here, and so I'm going to come back to that one and make sure that that goes through. And yeah, let's go back. I'll give it a couple minutes. I'll do that again. But the 25% complete was logged in our comments. So you'll see that % complete from 0 to 25%. Okay, so it does log our change. That was 3 minutes ago. Let's pull this up again. Let me make sure I save this. We go to the details. Oh, sure enough, you can see my actual work is set to 0. So let me make that 2 hours. I'm going to save it right here and just make sure that it doesn't get cleared out here. Then we'll go back to our add-ins and synchronize tasks again. And I may have a setting in here that's preventing that. So let's go take a look at our settings again. There we go. I was missing a setting. We want to automatically add time entries when actual work is increased. It is important that we show this to you because I want to show you what it can do and what it can't do. There are some limitations with this, but obviously the limitations are that it won't work if I don't have that setting set. So I check that, click OK. Now let's go to logical design again. And now it should allow me to enter the 2 hours. I'm also, as long as we're at it, we'll mark it 100% complete too. And I'll open this up. Let's go look at our time. Oh, sorry, I'm not sure what's going on there. We do have 2 hours. Save and synchronize. Okay, so we got a validation. Our tasks were synchronized. We are working on a timer for this so that it can do the synchronization without you having to remember to do this. It's just that if you don't remember to do it for training, I wouldn't want to do it that way because I want to show the results immediately. So let's just go back into logical design here. Update it. We can see the 100% complete updated. Once I synchronized and verified that the synchronization happened, we went from 25 to 100%. Also, the time entry was made, and it does let us know that that time was entered from Outlook. I'm going to do one other thing just to mess with this a little bit, is I'm going to go in here and change the % complete. I'm going to reset it. Because I want to show you one other thing. So now let's synchronize tasks again. We get the logical design back. And I go to the details, and it has the 2 hours there, as I expected. And I'll make it 4 hours. The actual work is your time entry. We'll go ahead and save it. I'll make sure I do it right this time. Now, 4 hours, Outlook just interprets that as half a day, so it says 0.5 days. That's okay. It still works. I go into my add-ins. Again, synchronize tasks. We'll make sure we get a completion validation there. When we go back to the task, I want you to see what it does, is that Outlook does not have a line-by-line time entry in it. It doesn't have the kind of time entry interface that you have in Project Insight here, where you can line up separate time entries and put a description in and additional data. It doesn't allow for that. What we're simply doing is saying how much time was there before. There were 2 hours in there before. If it's 4, then, well, that's simple, 2 plus 2. So it just figures out you've got 4, we only had a total of 2, so make another 2-hour entry, make sure the description is filled in as automatically entered from Outlook. That way we know that this isn't something that somebody went in here and did a detailed time entry on. Certainly if you did, you can come in here and edit it. But it's just letting us know that we automatically entered that from Outlook. Also, what you'll see, and I'll just explain this while I'm here. If I tried to say, if I had 2 hours in there and I said, oh, well, I'm going to change it from 2 to 1, it will simply come right back to me in Outlook as 2 hours. Outlook will not reduce time. It will not delete. Outlook can't delete anything from Project Insight. It can't reduce the time that you spent, the actual time entries you spent. It doesn't have the ability to do that. It can only increment up. If you need to go down or edit time that's already been made, you need to go back into Project Insight to do that. Okay, now I also set reminders, so you can see I had reminders set on these things. So I've got a bunch of task reminders, but I did not put these in the calendar. So I've got a bunch of stuff in here. My calendar is not being updated by these tasks because I chose, once again, let's look at our PI settings. I chose not to put them as appointments on my calendar. They're simply tasks. Okay. Now let's go look at this. We've looked at how we use all the features within Outlook. Once you know how to use these, and we've shown these, I think you'll find that the Office connector is really simple. I just had this document that I opened up and did a version 1 and a version 2 on it before we started this session, and you'll see that all we have is Save to PI. That's the only option that we have in Outlook, in Office, and this would be the same with Microsoft Excel or Microsoft PowerPoint. We're just using Word here as an example. And what I did with this one earlier, I don't know if I actually saved it. I want to show you how this can work with versioning. Okay, if I go into Word and I save a new document, so let's just say Save to PI. Once again, I'm going to that folder. I'm going to this folder that you see behind it here, and I'll say Document Version. I'll just say Document. Document from Connector. And we'll save that. And again, once it successfully saves, it gives me the option to just say OK, or I can click directly to it and go to the path, and there's my document. If I want, now I do need to go here if I want version control. If I want the next time that I save something, I don't want it to just overwrite this file, I want version control on it, then I'll go into Edit. I'll edit this file that's up here with a version control value on it, and I'll save it. We get into this more when we do our a different session that we have on document management. So I won't go into a lot of detail here, but I do want you to see that. If you're using the Office connector and you're going to be doing different versions and you don't want to lose track of the previous version of files that you uploaded, then we want to make sure that you come in here and you set the version control. By default, we don't set it. We simply decide that we'll override a file. So I'll say version 2, we'll go to version 3, and save to PI. So now what happens, because I have version control, if I overwrite this file, it will ask me, do you want to overwrite the existing Word file? I say yes. Now what it does is if I go download this file again, let's refresh this page first, and you'll see there's a version history tab that just showed up. So if I go to get this file and I open it, oh, there's already a dialog box open, but that's okay. You can see we opened the document with version 3. And in the version history, if I go to download that document, the earlier one, it doesn't have version 3 in it. So it's simply making a copy of every file that I upload when I upload a new one and replace it. Right. Now, your options would be, if you wanted to just upload a new file somewhere else, of course you do it the same way you always do these things with Word, is that you, let's open this again. You go save to PI, and you can save it as a different name. So you can save it as a totally separate file, just like you would any other on your file system. The important thing to keep in mind whenever you're doing this is that you see me opening these files from Project Insight and then saving them back to Project Insight. The system, or I should say the Microsoft Office application, does not know that your primary source of this file is Project Insight. We are not intercepting. Notice that I'm going to save to PI. We are not intercepting the save mechanisms within Microsoft Office. Microsoft has applications like SharePoint that do that, but Project Insight does not intercept the actions of the local file capabilities and settings in your Office programs. They will continue to work the same way they always have. What that means is that when you download, you'll notice this anytime that you download any file from the internet. If you download a file from the internet, maybe you're downloading it from a public site. What happens, what happens when you go to, any site anywhere, and it's a public site? You download an available Word document from that site, you edit the Word document, and you hit save. Did you just update somebody's file on their public website? Of course not. What you're doing when you hit save, if I hit save here, right now, I don't necessarily know where that file went. I hit save, and I don't necessarily know where it went. It didn't go to Project Insight. It went somewhere locally. It could even be in a very obscure temporary file where, which is often the case for Microsoft Office applications. When you download a file, it puts it in a temporary location, which it continuously purges. Let's see what happens if I say File Save As. It prompts me for where I want to put it. Okay, so when I did save, I don't necessarily know where it went. And keep that in mind. If you open something from the internet, whether it's anywhere else or Project Insight, what it's done is it's made a copy of this file locally and opened it from there. You may or may not know where that is. But what you do know is that if you want to save it back to Project Insight, you absolutely must use the Save to PI. Save up here is simply local. Once you're accustomed to that, I think you'll find it's very easy to use. It sure beats going into Project Insight and doing the other mechanism. If you're already in Word and you need to upload it, then upload it from Word, rather than going in here and saying, oh, I want to edit this file, I want to choose a different file and upload on top of this one for a new version. You can certainly do that, and that's how we train people when we first set them up with file uploads. But this is that next step that you can take to make it quite a bit easier. Okay, now I want to see if there are any questions. Does anybody have any questions right now? Certainly post those into the GoToMeeting session. Okay. Yeah, I'm not seeing any questions at this point. We'll look forward to working with you if you do have any, and I'll go ahead and turn the session back over to Janelle for our closing slides.
All right, well, here's just a quick reminder to join us online to stay up to date on the new webinar calendar. So we do have a new one for the product trainings and any other webinars. They will be posted shortly. And if you're not already with us or you have any other questions, feel free to email us at info@projectinsight.net. And in our Project Insight community, we have our blogs, a video archive with all sorts of trainings, getting started videos, introductory videos, and recordings of each webinar. And then, of course, there's a link to view the entire training and webinar calendar. That's all I have. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.